Welcome to my channel FOLKTales, where ancient wisdom meets modern souls. Today we journey deep into the heart of Zimbabwe, where the baobab trees whisper secrets that can shatter kingdoms and restore the righteous. This is a tale that will make your blood boil and your heart soar, the story of Amahle, the woman who came back from the dead to claim what was hers. In the shadow of the great Matobo Hills, where the granite boulders balanced like the dreams of ancestors, lived Amahle Moyo, a woman whose beauty was said to rival the golden sunrise over the Zambezi. She possessed the gift of the old ways, reading the patterns in bird flight and hearing the whispers of the baobab trees that had stood for 1,000 seasons. But on the night of the triple moon alignment, when the spirits walked closest to the earth, a darkness entered her womb that would test her very soul. Amahle had given birth to triplets, 3 daughters as precious as cowrie shells, when the village healer, Gogo Nahanda, pressed her weathered hands against Amahle's fevered brow and spoke the words that would shatter her world. The ancestors whisper of a sickness in your blood, child, the same sickness that took your grandmother.
Mbuya Chipo. The cervical ailment had been passed down through the women of her lineage like a bitter inheritance.
And now it bloomed within Amahle's weakened body like a poisonous flower. As she held her 3 babies, Rufaro, Chipo, and Nyasha, against her chest, she felt her strength ebbing away like water through cracked clay, while her husband Tendai sat in the corner, his eyes already distant, already calculating. The baobab tree outside their homestead had stood for 800 years, its massive trunk holding the memories of countless generations. Amahle's grandmother had told her that this ancient giant was their family's guardian, its roots reaching deep into the spiritual realm where their ancestors dwelled. On the night Tendai abandoned them, the great tree groaned and creaked as if mourning, its branches reaching toward the star-scattered sky like the arms of a grieving mother. Amahle had crawled from her sickbed when she heard Tendai's voice drifting from the kitchen, sharp and excited as he spoke into his phone. She will be dead within the month, the healer said so. Then everything will be mine. The mine, the cattle, the land, all of it.
Chiedza, my sweet flower, we will be the richest family in Matabeleland. The words struck Amahle like lightning strikes the tallest tree,
and she pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. Through the crack in the door, she watched her husband pack his clothes with the efficiency of a man who had planned this moment for months. He took his best shirts, his father's ceremonial axe, and the keys to the Toyota that her family had bought for their wedding. When dawn painted the sky the color of red clay, Amahle found only a note written in Tendai's careless scrawl. "Do not follow me. You are dead to me now." The babies cried as if they sensed the abandonment, and Amahle collapsed on the earthen floor, her body racked with fever and heartbreak, while the baobab tree's leaves rustled with what sounded like ancient curses. The baobab tree outside their homestead had stood for 800 years, its massive trunk holding the memories of countless generations. Amahle's grandmother had told her that this ancient giant was their family's guardian, its roots reaching deep into the spiritual realm where their ancestors dwelled. On the night Tendai abandoned them, the great tree groaned and creaked as if mourning, its branches reaching toward the star-scattered sky like the arms of a grieving mother. Amahle had crawled from her sickbed when she heard Tendai's voice drifting from the kitchen, sharp and excited as he spoke into his phone. "She will be dead within the month, the healer said so. Then everything will be mine. The mine, the cattle, the land, all of it. Chiedza, my sweet flower, we will be the richest family in Matabeleland." The words struck Amahle like lightning strikes the tallest tree, and she pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. Through the crack in the door, she watched her husband pack his clothes with the efficiency of a man who had planned this moment for months. He took his best shirts, his father's ceremonial axe, and the keys to the Toyota that her family had bought for their wedding. When dawn painted the sky the color of red clay, Amahle found only a note written in Tendai's careless scrawl. "Do not follow me. You are dead to me now." The babies cried as if they sensed the abandonment, and Amahle collapsed on the earthen floor, her body racked with fever and heartbreak, while the baobab tree's leaves rustled with what sounded like ancient curses. When the sun reached its zenith and Amahle had not emerged from her hut, her childhood friend Nomsan Dlovu came searching. Nomsa was a woman forged in fire, a nurse who had studied in Harare and returned to serve her people with hands blessed by both modern medicine and traditional healing. She found Amahle collapsed beside her crying babies, her body burning with fever, her lips cracked like the earth during the dry season. "Cece, what has that dog done to you?" Nomsa demanded, her voice carrying the fury of a lioness defending her cubs. Nomsa's strong arms lifted Amahle from the floor, while her keen eyes took in the evidence of Tendai's betrayal, the empty drawers, the missing ceremonial items, the abandoned note that spoke of his cruelty.
"That son of a jackal will pay for this," she whispered. But first, she had to save her sister's life.
Loading Amahle and the triplets into her old Mazda, Nomsa drove through the night to Bulawayo General Hospital, her foot heavy on the accelerator as she raced against death itself. In the hospital bed, as IV fluids restored life to Amahle's dehydrated body, Nomsa made a vow by the spirits of their shared ancestors. "He thinks you are weak, Cece, but he has forgotten that the lioness is most dangerous when she appears to be sleeping. We will let him believe you are dead, and then we will show him what resurrection looks like." 3 weeks after Amahle's collapse, as she lay recovering in the hospital under the false name of Sarah Sibanda, Tendai orchestrated a performance that would have made the master griots of old weep with its cruel artistry. He spread word throughout the district that his beloved wife had succumbed to her illness, her body too weak to fight the ancestral curse that had claimed her grandmother. The funeral he arranged was magnificent, a display of grief so convincing that even the village elders praised his devotion. Wrapped in the finest black cloth money could buy, Tendai wailed and threw dust upon his head, while the professional mourners he had hired sang traditional laments. "Amahle, my heart, my life," he cried, his voice carrying across the hills where their cattle grazed.
"How can I go on without you?"
The village chief, moved by this display of sorrow, spoke of Tendai as a model husband, faithful until death. Meanwhile, hidden in the crowd, Chiedza Dube watched with satisfaction as her lover performed his grief like a master actor. That night, as the mourners departed and the fake grave was covered with red earth and white stones, Tendai and Chiedza celebrated their freedom in the marriage bed that still held Amahle's scent. From her hospital window 90 kilometers away, Nomsa watched the funeral on a borrowed tablet, her jaw clenched like a steel trap, already planning their revenge. Under her new identity as Sarah Sibanda, Amahle began the slow, painful process of rebuilding herself from ashes. Nomsa had moved her to a small cottage in the Matopo district, far from the eyes of those who might recognize the dead woman. The triplets, now 6 months old, had grown strong and beautiful, their laughter becoming the medicine that healed their mother's broken spirit faster than any pills or potions. Rufaro, with her father's stubborn chin but her mother's gentle eyes. Chipo, who already showed signs of the ancestral gift, her tiny hands reaching for invisible things in the air. And Nyasha, whose smile could light up the darkest night. They became Amahle's reason to not just survive, but to thrive during the day while the babies slept. Amahle practiced the traditional crafts her grandmother had taught her, beadwork, pottery, and the weaving of baskets so beautiful they seemed to hold starlight in their patterns. Nomsa would take these creations to the markets in Bulawayo, selling them to tourists and collectors who paid good money for authentic African artistry. Slowly, coin by coin, note by note, Amahle began to accumulate her own wealth, hidden in secret accounts that bore her new name. In the evenings, as she sat beneath a young baobab tree that reminded her of her ancestral home, she would tell her daughters stories of their great-grandmother Mbuya Chipo, the woman who had once brought rain during the worst drought in living memory. "One day, my precious ones," she would whisper, "we will reclaim what was stolen from us, and the whole world will know that we are not ghosts, we are fire incarnate." While Amahle lived in humble obscurity, Tendai Mukamuri transformed himself from a village opportunist into a man of seemingly great substance. With his late wife's gold mine yielding its treasures and her family's cattle multiplying like the stars in the sky, he had become one of the wealthiest men in Matabeleland. His marriage to Chiedza was celebrated with such grandeur that even government ministers attended, bringing gifts and blessings for the bereaved widower who had found love again after his tragic loss. Tendai established the Amahle Moyo Foundation, supposedly dedicated to helping women with cervical cancer and supporting orphaned children. The irony was as sharp as a spear tip, using his dead wife's name and story to build his reputation as a humanitarian. At fundraising galas held in the grand hotels of Harare and Bulawayo, he would stand before crowds of wealthy donors and politicians, his voice breaking with manufactured emotion as he spoke of his beloved Amahle's brave fight against disease. "She died in my arms," he would lie, dabbing his eyes with an expensive handkerchief. "But her spirit lives on in the work we do through this foundation." The money poured in like the rains of a good season, and Tendai's fame grew with each tearful speech, each newspaper interview, each television appearance where he played the role of the devoted husband carrying on his wife's legacy. Nomsa had always possessed the patience of a master hunter, and now she employed every skill she had learned to gather evidence against Tendai, working her shifts at the hospital during the day and conducting her investigation by night. She slowly pieced together the full extent of his betrayal. The forged death certificate, signed by a corrupt official in exchange for a suitcase full of American dollars, the insurance policies that Tendai had tried to claim, only to be blocked by a suspicious investigator, the bank accounts that he had drained while Amahle lay dying. Every crime was documented and photographed with the meticulousness of a master detective. Her breakthrough came when she befriended Janet Muzenda, the housekeeper who cleaned the offices of Tendai's foundation. Janet, a devout woman whose grandmother had known Amahle's family for decades, was troubled by the discrepancies she saw in the foundation's books. "There are receipts for expensive cars and jewelry marked as medical equipment," she whispered to Nomsa during a chance meeting at the market. "And I overheard Mukamuri on the phone, laughing about how easy it was to fool the bleeding hearts who donate to his cause." Through Janet, Nomsa obtained copies of financial records that revealed the foundation was little more than Tendai's personal piggy bank, with less than 5% of donations actually reaching the women and children it claimed to serve. The evidence folder grew thick as a baobab trunk, each document another nail in Tendai's coffin. As the second year of her death dawned, Amahle had grown strong in ways she had never imagined possible. The sickness that had nearly claimed her life was now in remission, her body having responded to the combination of modern medicine and the traditional herbs that Gogo Nahanda secretly prepared for her. Her daughters were walking now, their bright laughter echoing through the small cottage as they played with dolls carved from wild fig wood. But it was Amahle's mind that had undergone the most dramatic transformation. The naive, trusting woman who had once believed her husband's lies had been reborn as someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. She began training her body as well as her mind, running through the hills at dawn like the warriors of old, building the strength that sickness had stolen from her. Nomsa taught her to fight, not with traditional weapons, but with words, with law, with the kind of strategic thinking that could topple empires. They studied Tendai's public appearances, analyzing his speeches for contradictions, memorizing the names of his supporters and donors, mapping out his network of corruption like generals planning a siege. "He has grown fat and lazy on stolen wealth," Nomsa observed, as they watched footage of Tendai at yet another gala, his belly straining against his expensive suit. "But we have grown hungry and lean. When we strike, it will be with the precision of lightning hitting the tallest tree." Adaran Mpofu was an investigative journalist who had earned his reputation exposing corruption in the highest levels of government. When Nomsa approached him with the story of Amahle's death and Tendai's fraud, his first instinct was skepticism. But as she laid out the evidence, photographs, documents, recorded conversations, his investigative instincts began to hum like a well-tuned mbira. "This is either the most elaborate hoax I've ever seen, or one of the most shocking crimes of the decade," he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he studied the forged death certificate under his magnifying lamp. Darren agreed to investigate, but only if he could verify every claim independently. Over the following months, he used his network of contacts to confirm the details of Nomsa's allegations. He discovered that the corrupt official who had signed Amahle's fake death certificate had a history of such transactions, selling false documents to anyone with enough money to pay his price. He found witnesses who had seen Tendai celebrating his wife's death on the very night he claimed to be grieving. Most damaging of all, he uncovered evidence that Tendai had been planning his betrayal for months before Amahle's diagnosis, transferring assets and establishing secret accounts with the cold calculation of a man who had already written off his wife's life. "When this story breaks," Darren promised, his voice tight with righteous anger, "it will not just destroy Tendai, it will send shockwaves through every corrupt system that enabled him." Chiedza Duba had married Tendai believing she was claiming a prize, a wealthy, respected man whose tragic past only added to his allure. But living with him day after day, she began to notice the small inconsistencies that revealed the man beneath the mask. He spoke of Amahle sometimes in his sleep, but not with the love of a grieving widower. His words were filled with contempt, with satisfaction at having escaped what he called that sickly burden. When she questioned him about these nighttime mutterings, his face would darken with an anger that made her blood run cold. The first major crack appeared when Chiedza discovered documents in Tendai's private safe that made no sense. Why would a man keep the original marriage certificate of a wife he claimed had died peacefully? Why were there insurance investigator reports that spoke of suspicious circumstances? When she confronted him with these questions, Tendai's composed facade shattered like poorly fired pottery.
"You stupid woman!"
he screamed, his hand raised as if to strike her. "Some things are not for you to understand. Your job is to look beautiful and keep your mouth shut." That night, as Chiedza lay in their marriage bed listening to her husband's snores, she realized she had bound herself to a cobra who wore a man's skin. The next morning she began her own investigation, driven not by love for a dead woman she had never met, but by the growing certainty that her own life might depend on uncovering the truth. On the 3rd anniversary of her death, Amahle experienced a visitation that would change everything. As she sat beneath the young baobab tree that had become her sanctuary, braiding her daughter's hair in the traditional patterns her own grandmother had taught her, the spirits of her ancestors came to her in the golden light of the setting sun. Mbuya Chipo appeared first, her ethereal form shimmering like heat waves rising from sun-baked earth, her eyes burning with the fire that had made her legendary for bringing rain in times of drought. "Granddaughter," the ancestral spirit spoke, her voice carrying the weight of centuries, "the time for hiding is over." The baobab does not hide its majesty. It stands tall and proud, its branches reaching toward the heavens, its roots deep in the earth of truth. You have been tested in the fire of betrayal and have emerged purified like gold. Now you must reclaim not just what was stolen from you, but restore the balance that his evil has disturbed. Other spirits materialized around Mbuya Chipo, generations of strong women who had faced down droughts, wars, and the cruelties of men who mistook gentleness for weakness. They placed their spectral hands on Amahle's shoulders, and she felt their strength flowing into her like water, flowing into a drought-cracked riverbed. When the vision faded with the last light of day, Amahle rose from the ground, a changed woman. She was no longer Sarah Sibanda, the hidden survivor. She was Amahle Moyo, daughter of the baobab, and she was coming home to claim her throne. Chiedza's investigation had led her down paths that chilled her to the bone. Using her position as Tendai's wife, she had access to records and conversations that painted a picture of a man whose capacity for cruelty knew no bounds. She discovered that Amahle had not died peacefully in Tendai's arms, as he claimed in his public speeches, but had been abandoned while gravely ill, left to die with 3 infant children. The evidence was hidden in plain sight, medical records showing no death at the hospital. Tendai claimed she had died in bank statements revealing the systematic theft of her family's wealth, even photographs of Amahle's supposed funeral that showed an empty casket buried in the red earth. The final revelation came when Chiedza found a burner phone hidden in Tendai's study, its messages revealing communications with the corrupt official who had forged Amahle's death certificate. "The job is done," read one message sent just days after Amahle's supposed death. "The papers are filed. She is officially dead, and no one will ever look for a ghost." Chiedza's hands trembled as she scrolled through months of messages that revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. That evening, as Tendai spoke at another Foundation gala about his beloved deceased wife, Chiedza made contact with Darren Mpofu through an encrypted messaging app.
"I know you've been investigating my husband," she typed, her heart pounding like drums calling warriors to battle.
"I have information you need, but more than that, I think his first wife might still be alive, and I know how to find her." The clandestine meeting between Chiedza, Darren, and Nomsa took place in a traditional beer hall on the outskirts of Gweru, far from the eyes of anyone who might recognize Tendai's wife or report back to him. Chiedza had come disguised in a simple dress and head wrap, looking more like a village woman than the glamorous socialite she had become. When Nomsa entered the smoky establishment, Chiedza gasped. The resemblance between Nomsa and the woman in the photographs from Amahle's funeral was unmistakable. They were sisters in all but blood. "She's alive, isn't she?" Chiedza whispered, her voice barely audible over the conversations of the other patrons. "Amahle Moyo is still alive." Nomsa studied the younger woman for a long moment, reading the fear and determination in her eyes before nodding slowly. "My sister lives, but she died the night your husband abandoned her. The woman who survived is something else, something stronger and more dangerous than he could ever imagine." Darren spread his evidence across the scarred wooden table.
Adding Chiedza's documents to the damning collection.
"With your testimony," he told Chiedza, "we can not only expose his fraud, but bring criminal charges that will put him in Chikarubi,
Maximum prison for the rest of his life."
Chiedza's hands shook as she signed the
Affidavit that would make her a key witness.
against her own husband. "He deserves whatever hell is coming to him," she said, her voice hardening like cooling iron. "But I want to see her face when she destroys him." Amahle's transformation from hidden survivor to avenging angel required more than just spiritual calling. It demanded practical preparation that would leave nothing to chance. Working with Nomsa and a small team of trusted allies, she began to reclaim her identity piece by piece. Legal documents were prepared, proving her true identity and her rightful claim to the property Tendai had stolen. Medical records were compiled, showing her recovery from the illness he had claimed killed her. Most importantly, she began to rebuild her physical appearance, shedding the simple garments of Sarah Sibanda for the elegant bearing of the Amahle Moyo, who had once been known
as the most beautiful
woman in 3 districts. The new Amahle was more magnificent than she had ever been. Her body, tempered by years of struggle and strengthened by determination, carried herself with the regal bearing of a queen returning from exile. Her hair, grown long during her years in hiding, was styled in intricate braids adorned with gold beads that caught the light like captured stars. The traditional dress crafted for her return was a masterpiece, deep indigo cloth decorated with ancestral symbols in gold thread, each pattern telling the story of her lineage and her resurrection. When she looked at herself in the mirror for the first time in years, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The soft, trusting girl Tendai had betrayed was gone forever. In her place stood a warrior goddess, beautiful and terrible as a summer storm, ready to reclaim her kingdom from the usurper who had thought her safely buried in the earth. Tendai's annual foundation gala was always the social event of the season, drawing politicians, businessmen, and socialites from across Zimbabwe and beyond. This year's theme was particularly grotesque in its irony, celebrating the legacy of love, 5 years of the Amahle Moyo Foundation. The venue was the Rainbow Towers Hotel in Harare, its grand ballroom decorated with photographs of Amahle from her youth, images that Tendai had somehow obtained and displayed like trophies of his supposed devotion. The guest list read like a who's who of Zimbabwe's elite, all eager to be seen supporting such a worthy cause. What none of them knew was that this gala would become the stage for the most spectacular downfall in the country's recent history. Darren and Pofu had spent weeks ensuring that every major media outlet would be present, ostensibly to cover the Foundation's anniversary celebrations. Television cameras, newspaper reporters, and social media influencers filled the hotel, all expecting a routine charity event. Meanwhile, Amahle made her final preparations in a suite just floors above the ballroom, her daughters safe with trusted caretakers back in the Matopo Hills. As she applied the final touches of her makeup, red ochre on her lips like the earth of her ancestors, coal around her eyes dark as the night sky, she whispered the names of all who had wronged her. Tonight, the dead would rise and the living would face judgment. The ballroom glittered like a cave full of diamonds as Zimbabwe's elite mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, their conversations a mixture of business deals and social gossip. Tendai held court at the center of it all, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo that cost more than most people earned in a year, his arm around Chiedza, who smiled like a woman hiding daggers behind her teeth. He moved through the crowd with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable, accepting condolences for his late wife and praise for his charitable work with equal grace. At exactly 9 o'clock, as Tendai took the stage to deliver his keynote address about Amahle's legacy, the lights in the ballroom dimmed to a single spotlight focused on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily through the state-of-the-art sound system, 5 years ago I lost the love of my life to a terrible disease. Amahle Moyo was not just my wife, she was my heart, my soul, my inspiration. The crowd murmured appreciatively, some dabbing at their eyes with expensive handkerchiefs. She died in my arms, but her spirit lives on through the work we do in her name. As he spoke these words, his voice breaking with manufactured emotion, the rear doors of the ballroom opened silently. A figure in flowing indigo robes began walking down the center aisle, her footsteps soundless on the plush carpet, her presence causing whispers to ripple through the crowd like wind through tall grass. The recognition began slowly, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire, jumping from tree to tree. At first, there were confused glances, people wondering why this elegant woman looked so familiar. Then came the gasps, the dropped champagne glasses, the pointing fingers of those who remembered the photographs of deceased Amahle Moyo that decorated the walls around them. On stage, Tendai continued his speech, oblivious to the growing commotion in his audience, his back turned to the approaching figure who moved with the inexorable grace of justice itself. "My beloved Amahle," Tendai was saying, his voice now reaching its emotional crescendo. "Wherever you are in the realm of the ancestors, I know you are watching over us tonight, proud of how we have honored your memory." It was then that the woman in indigo reached the foot of the stage, her voice cutting through his words like a blade through silk. "I am not in the realm of the ancestors, husband," Amahle said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's sound system as she took the microphone from his nerveless fingers. "I am very much alive.
And I have been watching you steal from my children, lie about my death,
And build your fortune on my supposed grave." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the click of camera shutters and the whir of television cameras as they captured the moment when a dead woman rose to confront her betrayer. Tendai's face went white as fresh cotton, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water, while Amahle stood before him like an avenging ancestor made flesh. The ballroom erupted in chaos as the implications of Amahle's appearance crashed over the assembled guests like a tsunami. Tendai, his face cycling through shock, fear, and desperate calculation, tried to regain control of the situation. "This is impossible," he stammered into his own microphone, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "My wife is dead. I buried her myself."
This woman is
"Is an imposter, someone trying to exploit our grief for money." But his words fell on deaf ears as Amahle began to speak, her voice steady and clear, each word precisely chosen to cut him down. "Tell them." "Tendai," she said, her dark eyes boring into his soul.
Tell them how I died.
"Tell them about the hospital where I supposedly breathed my last breath, the doctors who treated me, the nurses who held my hand as I passed into the spirit world." Chiedza chose that moment to stand from her table, her voice ringing out across the stunned crowd. "He can't tell you those things because they never happened. Amahle Moyo was never treated at Parirenyatwa Hospital, as he claims."
I have the records to prove it. As she spoke, Darren Mpofu and a team of police officers entered through the side doors, their presence sending another wave of shock through the assembly.
"Tendai Mukamuri," Detective Inspector Moyo announced, her voice carrying the authority of law itself. "You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and attempted murder." As the handcuffs clicked around Tendai's wrists, Amahle looked down at him from the stage with eyes that held no mercy. Only the cold satisfaction of justice finally served. 6 months later, as the baobab trees put forth their new leaves in the season of renewal, Amahle stood once again in the shadow of her ancestral home, her 3 daughters playing at her feet while the cattle her husband had tried to steal grazed peacefully on the hills. Tendai sat in Chikurubi Maximum Prison, serving a 25-year sentence that would likely see him die behind bars, a fitting end for a man who had tried to bury his wife alive. The Amahle Moyo Foundation had been dissolved, its assets distributed to legitimate charities that actually helped women with cervical cancer, while the media continued to dissect the scandal that had captivated the nation for months. Chiedza had proved instrumental in securing Tendai's conviction, her testimony and evidence sealing his fate. Now remarried to a kind doctor who treated her like the queen she had always deserved to be, she had found peace in a way that seemed impossible during her dark marriage to the man who had revealed himself to be a monster. As for Amahle, she had not only reclaimed her identity and her wealth, but had become a symbol of resilience for women across Africa and beyond. Her story, as told by Darren Mpofu in a best-selling book and acclaimed documentary, inspired countless others to refuse to accept the injustices imposed upon them by cruel men who mistook silence for weakness. Standing beneath the great baobab tree that had witnessed her grandmother's triumphs and her own resurrection, Amahle placed her hands on its ancient bark and whispered her gratitude to the ancestors who had guided her home. The tree's leaves rustled in response, carrying her words up to the star-filled sky where the spirits of strong women danced in eternal celebration of another victory over evil. The baobab's daughter had come home, and all was as it should be. And so ends the tale of Amahle Moyo, the woman who rose from the dead to reclaim her rightful place in the world. Her story reminds us that the ancestors are always watching, that justice may be delayed but never denied, and that underestimating the strength of an African woman is the greatest mistake any man can make. If this powerful story of betrayal, resurrection, and revenge stirred your soul and made your heart pound with the drums of justice, then show your appreciation by hitting that like button below. Your likes tell us that these ancient wisdoms and modern truths resonate with your spirit. And if you hunger for more tales that will make you laugh, cry, and believe in the power of our ancestors, then subscribe to Afrika FOLKTALE and ring that notification bell. We have countless stories waiting to be told, tales of trickster spiders, shape-shifting spirits, brave warriors, and wise women who changed the course of history with nothing but their courage and cunning. Share this story with someone who needs to remember their own strength, and let us know in the comments which ancestors' wisdom guides your own journey. Until we meet again under the baobab tree of storytelling, may your path be blessed and your enemies be as foolish as Tendai Mukamuri. Keep the stories alive, keep the culture strong, and remember, in every ending lies the seed of a new beginning.